relentlessly full sometimes that for matters of attention, that oftentimes critical matters have to beg, for a little bit of notice. The sufferings in Turkey and Syria after that massive earthquake is just one of those matters that nudges our hearts to prayer and to action. So accordingly, next Sunday, we will take our offerings for the Archdiocese for Military Services, who will forward them to Catholic Relief Services, who is always front-loading and paying it ahead for every natural disaster. So they are already there and already providing, and we will indeed assist them. On a different note, I reflect with you a little bit on the passage of time. Just a year ago, these very pews were dotted with big red and big green dots, keeping all at a proper distance because of COVID, and sign-in sheets greeted you at the doors so we could control the number of people who came to Mass. And there wasn't congregational singing. Those hymnals you're using were brand new, unused. Someone had said to me it was like being in China. How the times have changed as we now so freely gather to receive the Lord's Word and to worship together. What a delight it is to see the bodies walking through the parking lot, coming to be with their Lord as the Lord gathers them. So, speaking of God's Word, some of you are doing the Bible in a year, and still others the Catechism in a year. But for these past 3 weeks, we've been reading and hearing Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5. I recommend both interrupting your study of the Bible in a year and Catechism in a year projects to read chapter 5 of Matthew again. It contains Jesus' most noted teaching. First come the Beatitudes, in which the centerpiece is, "Blessed are the merciful." Jesus revealing God as full of mercy all the time. Those whose Lord is Jesus, they find blessing and mercy and happiness in the most unlikely of places, like adversity, because Jesus is Lord, even over adversity, even over death. Now, last week, the story in Matthew continued, and we heard Jesus tell the disciples that they, gathered with their Lord, were the salt of the earth, seasoning the world with Jesus' words and his works. And Jesus also spoke of salt not seasoning when people, salt of the earth, compromise or cease to practice their faith. Then the commandments and the love of Christ get trampled underfoot. Jesus also called the disciples light that gives vision to that which is one's life, and a city on a hill, making a difference that others can see. He says our light must shine. In essence, shine is an outward project, if you will. We're meant to be light, not stars to be admired. Rather, we are to be mirrors of the love of Jesus in our thoughts, in our words, and in our deeds. This week, Valentine's Day notwithstanding, Jesus, the perfect mirror of the love of the Father, implores you and I to go a little more deeply and to choose not only to keep God's commandments of love, but even more, to make the commandments fuller, says fulfilled. It begs the question, what is not full in the commandments? What room is there in the commandments, who are God's gift of love, that needs filling? So Jesus goes deeper into our very souls to transform our hearts so that we might each in our own way be mirrors of Christ. So Jesus teaching with authority in the phrase, "You have heard it said, but I say to you," as Lord, affirms our ability to choose. Listen to his word in Sirach again. "Before you are fire and water, life and death, good and evil. Stretch out your hand." And Moses, as you recall, before he died, recapped for the people their journey in faith from Egypt to the promised land and the urgency of the moment in Deuteronomy chapter 30. "I have set before you life and death," he says, "the blessing and the curse. Choose life," he begs them, "then that you and your descendants may live by loving the Lord your God, heeding his voice and holding fast to him." And Joshua, who succeeded Moses, gave the same sermon. Let me philosophize with you just a little bit now. We in the Western world are used to compartmentalizing things. We put things in boxes here and there, and keep them in order that way. Well, neither the Jewish people nor Jesus separated, compartmentalized, that is, body and soul. For they thought just as the body needed food, so too the soul needed food. Just as the body got sick, so too the soul got sick. Health is to the body what holiness is to the soul. And sickness is to the body what sin is to the soul. They thought of the two like a book. One was the words, and the other was the meaning. If one was changed, so was the other. So, in our body and in our soul, we are given to choose. Jesus, this is the profound thing of the incarnation. If you grasp the incarnation and seek to understand it for the rest of your life, it's worthwhile. Jesus in the incarnation, he enters into this conversation in Matthew's gospel today, teaching the disciples how to be mirrors of, rather than competing stars like the scribes and the Pharisees, who kept the commandments. They didn't kill, they didn't commit adultery or make false oaths. But Jesus exposes sickness of those who are merely following commandments. He takes them deeper into the core of their being, to that precious inner space in the human heart where we decide stuff and we exercise our will. You likely have seen pigeons in some of the local airborne flocks. I'm not a fan of pigeons. Neither, by the way, are statues, for obvious reasons. I've annually tried to have a hunting trip to hunt pheasant with my five brothers, who once, along with me, came to a farmer's barn that had a small window missing. Pigeons had found that opening and roosted in the loft. And over time, they made a terrible mess of all the good that was below. If you want that mess to go away, go to the root cause and not only get the mess out, but keep the mess out and the pigeons. Replace the darn window. Jesus goes to the root cause of what ails the human soul in Matthew's gospel. It's the heart. The thoughts, the words, the deeds, and the character, they all begin in the heart, the way we think. What we think becomes, our words. Our words become our deeds become habits. Habits become our character. To be real mirrors of God's love, they needed, like himself, to not only keep the commandments, but also have a clean heart. Jesus exposes that some of the religious people keep the commandments, but they're sick. For example, his hearers didn't kill anyone, but you can be sure that in their hearts, they were vacuum cleaners of gossip, often angry, and jockeyed for advantage even over one another. In addition, religious people crafted laws with regard to lust and adultery, so as to get by with fooling around, but not quite breaking the commandments. They chiseled away at the commandments, using people and things, exposing the disintegration at their very center, oozing with self-advantage and self-absorption, and making others servants of their own righteous drama. In Jesus' day, when men played around with commitments, and men would never do that today, it robbed their wives of survival, whereby they had to sell themselves to another man. Jesus calls out those dudes that they're playing with commitments, not only exposed their loveless hearts, but that they were causing women to commit adultery. Now, lusts are not just relegated to male or female sexuality, but to all the ways that people can use others and things for their self-drama. At this juncture, we're all a bit uneasy. But Jesus is teaching to the disciples, the salt and the light is an invitation from him to them and to us to go to that deep place of truth and honesty in the heart where we make those decisions. And remember that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And in the depths of our heart, where we make decisions, there to seek and to choose him as Lord over sin, over death, who cleanses sin, who makes us true in our words and our commitments, and who gets the pigeons out of our souls. And fluid oats, he says, are nothing other than lies. Brothers and sisters, at this, the table of the Eucharist, Jesus, the author of the commandments, invites us into that faithful, merciful, full of mercy heart of God, where he himself decided to be the food and the mirror of the Father's love, a love that does not fail. Read chapter 5 again of Matthew. When we choose him as Lord, who is greater than any Valentine, and receive him, he forms our hearts, and we become good mirrors.